these years. So it sounds like secrecy and being able to do things without oversight has become more and more rampant within the agency.
Yeah. And not just the FBI, the CIA, the National Security Agency, the entire intelligence community, and even groups you wouldn't think of. The Treasury Department has this very secretive program of collecting suspicious activity reports in banking that before 9/11 they would submit about 60,000 a year. After 9, now there's around 1.2 million a year. So the scope of this collection is just enormous, and nobody is really even, you know, I mean, as a civil libertarian, I worry about the rights of innocent people. But even if you're just a good government person who wants to know how the government is spending its money, you know, why do we have these vast programs? You know, one of the Patriot Act authorities was what they called Section 215, which allowed the government to collect on a daily basis all telephone metadata. So everyone you called, how long you called them, where you called, the numbers you called, everything is being collected every day. And they did this for 11 years.
On everybody?
On everybody in the United States. And when the program was finally leaked by Edward Snowden, Congress said, well, wait a minute, what about this program? And the government came out and said, it helped us stop 53 plots. And, you know, right away, well, you're gathering billions of telephone records. 53 plots doesn't really sound like a lot. But finally, Senator Leahy looked into it, and he got Keith Alexander, who was then the head of the NSA, on the stand, and he said, you know, isn't it true, now that we know what these plots are, that they're not all plots, and they weren't all stopped. And in fact, there's only one case that you can point to that involved, that this particular power was essential to stopping something, and that was $1,500 being sent to Somalia by an American. And Keith Alexander said, no, I'm pretty sure there were 2 cases. Which, you know, okay, now we can get rid of that program, and they've since modified it, but if you have something that doesn't work, why are we doing it, right? There are bad people out there. I mean, I haven't been an FBI agent. I know that there are criminals out there. You know, we should be going after them, and unfortunately we're not. And it's fascinating because one of the things that I thought with all this massive surveillance was that they would solve a lot of regular street crime, you know, regular kind of crime. It would be much easier to find. But actually, if you look at it, prosecutions have gone way down since 9/11, and consistently down. And you know, it's amazing the way candidate Donald Trump talked about crime in the United States, and most Americans believe crime is rising, but this is actually one of the safest periods ever in the United States. And of course, as New Yorkers, we know this in New Jersey, you know, that New York is an incredibly safe city compared to the way it was 30 years ago. There are still problems. Baltimore and Chicago in particularly have bad problems, but overall, nationwide, crime is way, way down. The homicide rate has dropped so much, but as the homicide rate dropped, the homicide solve rate dropped. So we're solving less homicides now than we were when we had 1,000 a year. To where last year, 40% of U.S. homicides went unsolved. If you talk about rapes, 60% of reported rapes go unsolved. And we have rape kits sitting on crime shelves all across the country untested because that's not national security.
And so if we look at homicide rates versus rates of people being injured or killed by terrorists, what's that ratio?
It's remarkably low. I mean, there are very few terrorist attacks in the United States and very few homicides from terrorists. We're talking a dozen, maybe 2 or 3 dozen a year. You know, there are outlying events like Omar Mateen's shooting, if you want to call that terrorism. You know, obviously we have mass shootings, but even mass shootings, which far outpace terrorism, are only about 250 homicides, when annually we have about 15,000 homicides. So it's this very tiny segment that we focus a lot of resources on without recognizing. In 2011, there was a triple homicide in Waltham, 2013, there was the Boston Marathon bombing, and the guy who was pointed out by witnesses, somebody who would know something about that 2011 homicide, was Cameron Sarney, who was the Boston Marathon bomber. And there's all this predictive analytics that they're doing with this data, where I would argue if you've killed 3 people in the past, that's probably a pretty good indicator you're a dangerous person who we need to investigate. Forget all the other stuff, that if we solve these homicides, we might not have terrorism. If we solve these rapes, we might not have the homicides. That's how you make all communities safer. And besides that, we're solving the homicides and we're solving the rapes. So, that's the way we make a community safe, is by treating everybody, violence against anybody, as something that we have to take seriously.
I'm always, as a reporter, always listening for the story. And one of the things I hear in what you're saying is those homicides and rapes don't fit the story that serves someone.
Right.
So this story that we must protect our national security, who does that serve? Who is it that is able to gain power by that kind of story?
Well, first and foremost, the intelligence community, right? They're the ones who get the resources. They're the ones who get the authorities. And it's fascinating because the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover was an inveterate racist and misogynist. He didn't allow women, and was forced in the last couple of years of his directorship to admit black agents, but there were only a handful. But every year after he died, it got a little bit better. It was slow progress, and it never came close to meeting the demographics of our country, but you could see progress every year until 2001. In 2001, that progress reverses every year. And even though Director Robert Mueller, who was director on 9/11, said, diversity in the FBI is a problem and we want to solve it, James Comey, the next director, said diversity